Hello. This happened in Salem about 3 summers ago when I went there to stay with my friend Josh during summer vacation. Josh had moved there a year earlier because of his dad's work, and ever since then, he kept telling me how weird Salem felt after dark. At first, I thought he was just hyping it up because of all the witch history and haunted stuff the city's known for. But honestly, after spending a few days there, I started understanding what he meant, because the place really did feel different at night. Even normal neighborhoods felt strangely quiet, like people avoided being outside too late. One night there was this huge storm outside. Rain was hitting the windows so hard, it sounded like somebody throwing pebbles at the glass, and every few minutes thunder would shake the whole house. Me and Josh were in his room playing games and messing around because there wasn't much else to do. At some point, Josh randomly goes, "Yo, wanna try a Ouija board?" I started laughing because I thought he was joking, but then this dude reached under his bed and actually pulled one out. Apparently he bought it from some tourist shop downtown because he thought it looked cool. Around midnight, we started playing with it, just for fun. Honestly, we weren't taking it seriously at all. We were asking stupid questions, trying to scare each other, acting dumb like teenagers do, but nothing happened. The board didn't move once. After maybe 20 minutes, we got bored and stopped playing. We shoved the board aside and just laid in bed, scrolling through our phones, while the storm kept getting worse outside. A few hours later, I woke up because of thunder. The room kept flashing white every time lightning hit outside, and Josh was awake too. He checked his phone and laughed quietly before saying, "Bro, it's 3 a.m. right now, witching hour." I told him to shut up, but because we were tired and bored and the whole atmosphere already felt creepy, we decided to try the board one more time. This time felt different immediately. The room felt colder somehow, even though the AC wasn't on any higher. The rain outside sounded louder, and every shadow in the room looked strange whenever lightning flashed through the windows. We sat on the floor again and put our fingers on the planchette. Josh jokingly asked, "Any spirits here with us?" For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then slowly, the planchette moved toward yes. I immediately looked up at him, and he looked back at me the same way. Neither of us laughed this time because the movement felt too smooth, like neither of us was actually pushing it. Josh quietly said, "Bro, stop messing." I told him I wasn't touching it. Right after that, we heard a loud sound come from upstairs. Not like footsteps or doors moving. It sounded heavier than that, almost like something large had fallen over or been dragged suddenly across the floor above us. Both of us froze immediately because there wasn't even an upstairs room directly above Josh's bedroom, just the attic. We sat there listening, hoping we'd hear something else that made sense, but the house went completely quiet again, except for the storm outside. I remember feeling this weird pressure in my chest all of a sudden, like the whole mood of the room changed. Josh nervously laughed and said, "Yeah, okay, I think we're done with this." Neither of us wanted to keep playing after that, so he shoved the board back under the bed and we tried going to sleep. The next morning, Josh's mom left for work early, and Josh went out around noon to meet some friends. I stayed home because I was tired and honestly too lazy to go anywhere. For the first hour, everything felt normal. I was downstairs watching TV and scrolling through TikTok when I suddenly heard movement upstairs. At first, I assumed Josh came back home without me noticing, so I yelled, "Yo, you forget something?" No answer. The movement stopped for a second, then started again. Slow footsteps, very calm, moving across the hallway upstairs. And I swear, the second I realized I was alone in that house, my stomach dropped. I muted the TV and just sat there listening. The footsteps stopped again. Then a few seconds later, I heard another loud sound upstairs. This time it sounded closer, like something heavy shifting across the floor. I kept trying to tell myself it was probably pipes or the house settling because of the storm from last night, but deep down, I already felt something was wrong. Then I heard whispering, very low. I couldn't make out words, but it sounded like multiple people talking quietly at the same time, coming from Josh's room. At that point, every hair on my arm stood up. I remember just sitting there completely frozen, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Then I heard somebody laugh upstairs. Not loud, just this quiet little laugh, like somebody trying not to be heard. That was enough for me. I walked outside as fast as I could without fully running, because I genuinely didn't want to stay inside that house alone anymore. I waited outside near the driveway for almost 40 minutes until Josh finally got back. The second he saw me standing outside, he started laughing and asked why I looked terrified. I told him everything that happened, but he didn't believe me at all. He kept joking around, saying Salem finally got into my head. But later that night, he stopped joking, because weird things kept happening around the house after that. Nothing dramatic at first, just small things that slowly started getting harder to ignore. Sometimes we'd hear footsteps upstairs when everybody was downstairs. Sometimes doors we knew were closed would suddenly be open later. His dog stopped going near the attic stairs completely and would literally whine if somebody tried bringing him close to them. And almost every night after that, sometime around 3 a.m., we'd hear whispering somewhere in the house. One night, Josh woke me up because he thought I was standing in the hallway outside his room, but I had been in bed the whole time. Another night, we both heard whispering outside the bedroom door, and the second Josh got up to check, it stopped immediately. I stayed in Salem for 2 weeks, and honestly, by the end of those 2 weeks, the whole house felt wrong. Like there was always somebody else there with us, even when we couldn't see them. Then eventually I went back home, and after a while, I started convincing myself maybe we just scared ourselves because of the Ouija board and the creepy atmosphere. But about 2 months later, Josh called me late one night, and I could immediately tell something was seriously wrong. He told me his father had died suddenly from a heart attack. Then after a long silence, he quietly said, "There's still stuff happening in the house." Apparently things had gotten worse after I left. His mom kept hearing footsteps upstairs at night, even when nobody was there. Doors would open by themselves. Sometimes they'd hear whispering outside their bedrooms late at night. Then Josh told me something that honestly still messes with me. A few nights before his dad died, somebody knocked on his bedroom door at around 3 a.m. His dad thought it was Josh and opened the door, but nobody was there. A week later, he died. And deep down, I think whatever's in that house now is the same thing we invited in the night we used that board.
This happened in New Orleans when I was 20 years old. Me and 2 of my friends had gone there during summer break because we wanted one of those fun, chaotic trips where you stay out all night and do dumb stuff you laugh about later. Now, I grew up Catholic, not super religious or anything, but my family was close with this priest back home named Father Morales. He was one of the calmest people I'd ever met, soft-spoken, never dramatic, never the type to scare people for no reason. But one thing I always remembered about him was how much he hated New Orleans. I remember one time my mom jokingly asked him if he'd ever gone there for Mardi Gras, and his whole expression changed. He just quietly said, "No city carries things like that place does." At the time, I thought he just meant crime or partying or whatever adults usually complain about, so I never really thought much about it. But years later, when we actually got there, I started understanding what he meant. During the daytime, the city was amazing. Music everywhere, people partying, street performers, crowded restaurants. It felt alive. But after dark, especially once you got away from the busy streets, the whole atmosphere changed. It's hard to explain unless you've been there. Even when people were laughing around you, something about the city still felt heavy underneath all of it. One night, me and my friends stayed out way too late around Bourbon Street, and while trying to find this cafe somebody recommended online, we accidentally wandered way farther than we meant to. The streets slowly got quieter the farther we walked. Less music, fewer people, fewer cars. Eventually, it got to the point where the only thing you could really hear was our own footsteps and the occasional sound of music somewhere far away. That's when we passed this old church. It wasn't huge or dramatic looking or anything, just old, really old. Iron fence around it, tall, narrow windows, lights glowing faintly inside. And standing near the front gate was a priest, older man, black clothes, white collar, holding a ring of keys in one hand. At first, I assumed he was locking up for the night or something. As we walked past, he looked at the 3 of us for a few seconds and then said, "You girls shouldn't be walking around here this late." One of my friends laughed awkwardly and told him we got lost trying to find our way back. The priest nodded, but instead of answering, he looked down the street behind us for a second. Then he looked back at us, and I swear his whole expression changed, like he suddenly noticed something we didn't. Then he asked us, "Did anyone speak to you?" We all looked confused and said no. For a couple seconds, he didn't say anything. Then very calmly, he goes, "If you hear knocking tonight, do not answer it." I remember getting this weird feeling immediately because of how serious he sounded. He didn't sound crazy or theatrical or anything like that. Honestly, that's what made it worse. My friend Sarah tried joking about it afterward and said, "Bro really gave us a horror movie warning." But even while she was laughing, I couldn't stop thinking about the way that priest looked at us before he said it. Eventually, we made it back to the hotel, and after a while, we forgot about the whole thing. Around maybe 3 a.m., I was still awake scrolling on my phone while my friends were trying to sleep. The room was mostly dark except for my screen. Then I heard it. 3 knocks. Slow, evenly spaced. At first, I honestly thought it was somebody drunk at the wrong room because people in hotels do dumb stuff late at night all the time. But then, Sarah sat up from the other bed and whispered, "You heard that too, right?" Before I could answer, the knocking came again. Same pattern, 3 slow knocks. And for some reason, hearing it the second time made my stomach drop because it instantly reminded me of what the priest had said earlier. Nobody moved for a few seconds. Then we heard something else, breathing. Very faint, but definitely there, right outside the door. Sarah slowly got out of bed and started walking toward it, probably thinking it was some joke or drunk guest. And I swear the second she reached for the handle, I remembered the priest's warning so clearly it almost felt like somebody saying it directly into my ear again. I immediately yelled, "Don't open it." She stopped and looked back at me confused, and then from the hallway outside, a voice, very soft, almost whispering, "Wrong room?" The second we heard that, all 3 of us froze. Because the voice sounded strange, not deep or demonic or anything obvious like that. It just sounded wrong, like somebody trying too hard to sound human. Then we heard slow footsteps walking away down the hallway. None of us moved for a while after that. We just sat there listening. Eventually, after maybe 10 minutes, Sarah finally checked through the peephole. Nobody was there. Hallway completely empty. The next morning, we asked the woman at the front desk if there had been complaints about somebody knocking on doors overnight. She looked confused and told us nobody had been on our floor after midnight because one of the elevators had stopped working and the security cameras in that hallway were down. That alone creeped me out enough. But the worst part happened later that afternoon. Before leaving New Orleans, I decided to stop by that church again because I genuinely wanted to thank the priest for warning us. Inside the church, there was a woman sitting near the front office, probably some kind of secretary or volunteer. I described the priest to her and asked if he was around. The second I mentioned him, she looked confused. Then she quietly said, "Father Benoit passed away 3 years ago." I honestly thought she misunderstood me at first. I even described exactly what he looked like and what he was wearing, and the more I described him, the more uncomfortable she looked. Then she pointed toward an old framed photograph near the hallway wall, and it was him. Same priest we talked to outside the church the night before. I didn't even know what to say after that. Me and my friends left New Orleans the next morning, and ever since then, whenever somebody tells me not to do something in a place that already feels wrong, I listen.